This is the Microsoft Cloud Show, episode 159, where we're going to recap the Microsoft Ignite 2016 conference and talk to Jeff Teper, CVP of SharePoint and OneDrive. Welcome to the Microsoft Cloud Show, the only place to stay up to date on everything going on in the Microsoft Cloud world, including Microsoft Azure, Office 365, SharePoint, the competitive landscape, and related technologies. Just the information. No marketing, no BS. I'm Chris Johnson.
And I'm Andrew Connell.
Send us a tweet either to the show at MS Cloud Show or to Chris at LoungeflyZ.
Or to Andrew at Andrew Connell.
As we'd love to connect with you. We're just two dudes telling you how we see it. The Microsoft Cloud Show is sponsored by Valid.nl. Valid is a Microsoft Gold partner whose mission is to enable its customers to excel in their business through the innovative use of technology. Valid is always on the lookout for consultants, architects, and engineers. Do you know Azure, BI, and Analytics, .NET, Office 365, or SharePoint? Look them up on Valid.nl. Good morning, AC.
Good morning, CJ. How are you?
Very well. Quite tired, though, I got to tell you.
Yeah, my feet, my voice, my eyes, and I'm tired after a week of Ignite.
It was a very long but great week. I had a blast. How about you?
I had a blast too. I had a lot of fun. It was an interesting experience not presenting at a show like this for really the first time since, in the longest I can remember. I think maybe 6-7 years. As our listeners know, we covered the podcast, or with the podcast, we covered the conference quite a bit. We pumped out, I think, 11 episodes over the past week from our little short Ignite Wire episodes, from our longer discussions. We've got 2 or 3 recordings, I think, that we're looking forward to publishing in the future from people that we've spoken to. And man, I tell you what, it was really great to run into some listeners and hand out some of our stickers. Those of you who don't have stickers, don't worry, we have a lot left. And man, that live episode that we did earlier this week was an absolute blast. I had so much fun doing that with you.
Yeah, it was really great to see Microsoft do that for podcasters at the show and let us do the live broadcast. They gave us a great setup. It was almost like a mini TV studio. Mm-hmm. It was really cool to see them do that, and we very much appreciated it. And I hope everybody liked tuning in on a video. We've put the video up on YouTube as well, at the Microsoft Cloud Show YouTube channel, so you can go check out a recording of that. And we also dropped it in as audio only into the feed as well, so you'll be able to get an episode with just that through your podcast app as well.
Yeah, that was episode 154, if anybody wants to go listen to it. So you should be on your phones already. And like CJ said, it's already up on YouTube. They filmed it with those really high-res cameras. And I tell you what, the first thing I did when I saw that, I've never seen my forehead in that much resolution.
It's quite scary when you see yourself in HD, isn't it?
It's quite a bit. I'd say the only thing from that live show that I wish that we had done differently is I wish that the studio was on the floor of the expo to kind of get a little bit more excitement and buzz. There's a connector that goes between 2 of the big conference area halls, and one of them was the meal hall and one of them was the expo hall. And I really think it would have gone well like they've done in previous shows like at Build, where if they put it on the expo floor and people walking around can stop by and see and a little bit of that buzz, that would have been really cool. So, a lot of people asked us, we hope we would do that again. You and I live in Florida, you live in Seattle, so we're 3 hours time difference away from each other. And I don't think the live shows when we're remote from each other is going to be nearly as cool as when we're together. So those opportunities that present itself, man, I think that we definitely want to take advantage of that in the future. And do it again.
Well, we'll definitely do it again sometime.
Yeah.
So what were some of the highlights of the show for you? I guess let's talk about Ignite a little bit. Everything from things that you saw, people you met, the expo floor, just the general feel of the conference. What did you think were some of the highlights?
I thought it was a really good show. I know that this is the last day as we're recording this. We both are back home, but today is the Friday, September the 30th, that we're recording this after the show. And so it's still going on. I know that they're announcing it for where it's going to be for next year and stuff. I think as far as highlights go, the big thing for me, I enjoyed the format of the keynotes. I love the venue of the keynotes. As far as like announcements, I think that were really cool. For me, those field programmable gate arrays and what they're going to do for computing, you really can't underestimate or over-exaggerate what that impact is going to have for people and for computing going forward. I thought that was just absolutely tremendous, and I was super thrilled by the demo that we saw. The other stuff, too, just about the podcast and having listeners coming up, that was when you do this, you and I speak into these microphones and we publish an episode out and we enjoy it. And every once in a while we talk to people on Twitter, or we know we have some of our friends that listen to the show. But I really enjoyed running into people who just kind of came up and said, love the show. They share their experience with us. And I also really liked that I had like 2 or 3 people that came up to me that had not listened to the show. They found out about it. They started listening to it. And 2 of them found me later on in the week and said, hey, I listened to some of your episodes this week. This is an awesome show. It was like, fantastic, cool. Man. Go back and download all the old stuff and listen to it. It was great.
Meeting listeners and stuff was fantastic. I gave out a ton of stickers, met a ton of people. They came to the Hyperfish booth and said hi as well to try to find me. And I was just blown away by the reception. That was fantastic. Yeah. I think, one of the other highlights for me was I think the expo floor was really cool. I didn't like the shape of the expo floor. So for anybody who didn't go to Ignite, the shape of the expo floor was sort of very long and skinnier than I would have liked. And so walking from one end of the expo floor to the other was really, I would say it's probably a solid 5 or 6 football fields long. Yeah. I mean, it was massive. And it would take you 10 or 15 minutes just to sort of get through all the booths and all that. But the number of vendors that were there and the interesting things they had and the booths and everything were really interesting. Lots of great stuff going on, really vibrant ecosystem. That was really a highlight for me. Having to do all the walking. I'm not averse to walking, but you kind of get over it when you're doing that walk, 3 or 4 or 5 times a day. It gets kind of tiring. So it could have been laid out a bit better, but the content was awesome.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think if there was a negative about the week for me, it probably was the venue. I mean, it worked, and I get it. I mean, you got 23,000 people. There's only so many places you can go and hold something like that pulls it off. But I did think that of all the conference centers I've been to, I do think that one was by far one of the hardest ones to navigate. There was a lot of choke points in it. The expo floor hall, I agree with you. I love the expo floor hall, but I think one of the biggest challenges from the expo floor for me is that not only was it long and narrow, but it was very hard to orient yourself. And it was hard to see what end of the floor am I on? Which way was was the C concourse or the B concourse on which side? Trying to figure out where you were. I found that to be the most challenging. There were a couple times I was coming to find y'all's booth, and I ended up was on the completely other side of the conference center and not knowing it. But yeah, I know a highlight for you too. I will say a highlight for me was seeing how many people that you guys had at your booth. I was really happy for you guys of the success you guys were having in terms of the outreach and your first response, your first big public response that you had.
Yeah, we could not be happier with how it went. I said at the beginning of the week, I was nervous about what people would think, right? We're a new startup and this is kind of our first big marketing moment. And so my nerves were more about what people would think. And then as we went through the week, those sort of nerves started changing to, oh my goodness, how are we going to scale fast enough? And which is an awesome problem to have. So yeah, we were blown away by the reception. We had so many great conversations on the booth. People were like, cool, so how do I buy it? Yeah. And we just couldn't be happier. We're of course really tired now. It was a massive week for us. But like I said, it kind of went off without a hitch in many ways, which was all we could hope for.
Yeah, I agree, man. It was really cool to see the reaction you guys got. And the thing that I liked about it the most, or that it really works for you guys too, is that you had so many people came up to your booth and you guys would explain what the problem is. And they're like going, yeah, we have that problem. And it was businesses of all sizes. And you could just really easily, we fixed that problem. But I like the other thing you guys did where you had the little fish logo and sticking it on people's badges. And it was really neat to walk around the conference and see that fish logo on so many people's badges and know how many people you really touched. I mean, you guys, that's really cool. I'm really proud of you guys.
Yeah, I mean, we were giving away GoPros each day. If you stuck the sticker on your badge or somewhere on you and then took a funny photo with it, right? So, and it kind of went a little viral. It was kind of cool. And in fact, the last day we were there, I got in the elevator and in the hotel and went down and there was a guy looking, a little tired and hungover, but he had the Hyperfish logo on his badge and I just sat there thinking, wow, that's really cool.
I remember I was running the elevator with you and I looked over and was like, I nudged you. I'm like, going, check it out, the fish. And Same thing. I did the same thing. I'm really, congratulations. I'm glad things went well for you guys this week.
No, thanks very much. And thanks to everybody who came up and talked to us about it and congratulated us on the launch and just had really good questions and interactions. We couldn't be happier.
Awesome.
Hey, so we had a ton of interviews that you did this week with all sorts of different people at the show. And in the live show that we recorded, we sort of recapped a little bit about a few of those conversations and who you did them with. But there's one interview in particular that really was definitely a highlight, I know, for you and also for our podcast in general, possibly the largest, most important person, I guess, for want of a better word, that we've ever had on the show. So who did you talk to in the last sort of 48 hours that we're going to talk to today?
Yeah, I reached out to him, and I'm really glad we were able to make this work with his schedule, because I'm sure he was just pulled in so many different directions. But I got to sit down with Jeff Teper. Jeff Teper is in charge of the SharePoint and OneDrive business for Microsoft. People who are in the SharePoint space, I'm sure you recognize the name. If you don't, well, you're probably new to the business. I'm just kidding. But so Jeff was with the SharePoint group for a while. He left to go do a bunch of strategy stuff with Microsoft in a different group, and then came back in the last year or two to come back to the SharePoint space and really kind of revitalize and stuff. And I sat down with him on Thursday morning at the show, and we had a really good conversation about a couple different things. I really wanted to try with the interview to ask him things that weren't so much things that you would hear him talk about like in a keynote or some other places. So you're going to hear some stuff in this interview that you may not have heard before. You definitely, the last two things that Jeff and I talked about, the two questions I asked him, I intentionally went with stuff that was not exactly SharePoint focused. I wanted to kind of get a little bit more insight into who Jeff is and what he was bringing to the table and stuff. So I did kind of hit him with those as a bit of surprise questions, but absolutely love the responses we got from him too. It adds a human element to it, I think, is what was really interesting about it. So we had a really good time doing it. I hope we can sit down with him again in the future at some point and do that again. So it was a great interview. So at least I think so. So I hope our listeners think the same.
Yeah, I think, Jeff coming back, he came back to the SharePoint team just before I left Microsoft last September. And in the year since, it's almost exactly a year, just a few days over, really. In that period of time, he's really brought a feeling of revitalization to the ecosystem and to the community, and seems to be off on the right foot doing that stuff. It's getting in there amongst the community and socializing and really sort of breathing life back into that world. So I think he's obviously had a very positive impact on SharePoint over the last 12 months. And this show for them was really about showing what they're delivering to what they talked about at the May 4th event for the future of SharePoint. And they nailed it. I think they did a great job this week, and in no small part from, all from Jeff's team. So fantastic.
I totally agree. We saw that, on a Power BI dashboard that was floating around all week, that we saw SharePoint was the leading term for the entire week. We saw a lot of questions, a lot of positive momentum around SharePoint. And I think the other big thing that you saw, that aside from just people talking about it, from all the stuff that was talked about in the May 4th, the event, and then some, they've delivered, and everything was all good. So.
Yeah, excellent.
All right, so why don't we go ahead and roll the interview and let everybody listen to this. It's about a 30-minute interview, so sit back, enjoy, and have a listen to us talking to Jeff. This is Andrew. I'm sitting here at Ignite again, and today we have as a guest Jeff Teper from Microsoft. Jeff, how are you doing today?
Great, Andrew. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. We're really looking forward to having you on the show, and so this is a really nice treat for our listeners as well. For our listeners who aren't familiar who Jeff is, would you just take a second and kind of let them know who you are?
Yeah. No, I've been at Microsoft for a couple of decades, actually. In the late 90s, I started this little product called SharePoint and helped it grow throughout the years. And then I guess it was about 5 years or so ago, I took on program management for the Office 365 servers. We launched Office 365, then ran corporate strategy for the year, first year Satya's at the time as CEO. And then Satya asked me to come back to SharePoint a little over a year ago. And so here we are pumping up SharePoint and OneDrive at Ignite.
Awesome. Yeah, you're getting some really good feedback. We've noticed that on Twitter, like the number one term for around Ignite has been SharePoint. It's been that way since the opening keynote. I know Office 365 and Azure kind of dance around between number 1 and 2, but it's almost like a 2-to-1 difference.
Yeah. I think a lot of people don't really appreciate how the SharePoint community is this incredible group of people, SharePoint being sort of the Lego kit that a diverse set of people, developers and users, use to assemble solutions for their company. And we've really had a resurgence in the community in the last year since our May 4th event of the SharePoint Vision. And then at Ignite, it was really the culmination where that community is fired up with what we've got. And we get great feedback out of it. We got a couple more days at the conference. Let's see if we can end number 1 as well.
That sounds good. I know you mentioned the community. It's been, I've been doing this since, I guess, September 2003 when SharePoint Portal Server came out. And I remember going to conferences and there was no SharePoint track. There was like 5 or 6 SharePoint people that were there, and watching it when MVP Summit, there was just 4 or 5 of us that were doing it. So it's crazy how much has changed over the last 10, 15 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you mentioned one of the big themes that I've noticed this week, which is about delivering on your promise from the May the 4th event, the Future SharePoint event. A lot of stuff around there. You've got new team sites, new document libraries, new lists, the mobile application. I mean, there's a lot there that you guys are talking about this week. What are you telling people when you're saying, what's the big message for SharePoint coming out of Ignite this week?
Yeah, no, that's great. We've done so much in SharePoint over the years that we really wanted to, first on May 4th, give folks a very simple, clear, powerful vision for SharePoint. So it's what we articulated in May 4th and amplifying at Ignite. So first, SharePoint's your mobile intelligent intranet. Most companies don't have an intranet on their phone. They have an intranet on SharePoint. 9 of the 10 best intranets running on SharePoint. And first and foremost, what we're trying to do is use the intelligence of the Microsoft cloud and a new mobile experience to get people their intranets on their phone. Publish sites, collaboration sites, on-prem sites, cloud sites. SharePoint's the way to get the intranet in your pocket. So that's first thing. Second thing is we want to be the best collaboration solution. So SharePoint's the leader in team collaboration. What we've done at Ignite is really deliver on this promise of every group in Office 365 gets a SharePoint site. So a group is a list of people. SharePoint's where they go to work. They can use SharePoint. They can use Planner. They can use Outlook. We announced this week they'll be able to use Yammer integrated with groups. And so really, frankly, versus last Ignite, what we did on May 4th was clarify the relationship of SharePoint and groups. Groups is a list of people. SharePoint's the site. Third thing is really amplifying OneDrive. We've gotten great feedback on OneDrive over the last year, made a lot of progress versus last Ignite. So we're now on all mobile platforms, the Mac, the PC. 100 million people have downloaded the OneDrive client for Android, top rated, for example. And the third thing we're doing is clarifying that OneDrive is sort of your super explorer for all your files, personal, team, work, connecting to SharePoint. We delivered the preview of SharePoint Sync this week. That's 3. And then the fourth thing is we love, part of the reason the community is passionate about SharePoint is they can extend it, they can tailor it, they can build things they're proud of, they can meet business needs. And we wanted a more modern extensibility story for SharePoint aligned with the rest of not only Microsoft, but the industry. And so that's where we've done some great integration with Power Apps and Flow for people who are sort of not developers. And then the Microsoft Graph API, which is based on REST, and the SharePoint framework, which is based on some open source JavaScript technology for extending the UI. And then lastly, we have tremendous progress getting everybody to the cloud, 70 million monthly active users. But we know people are going to get there in stages. And so in May 4th, we released the new server. And this week at Ignite, we committed by November, we would ship the first feature pack ever for SharePoint. So more value faster to on-premises customers. SharePoint's the mobile intelligent intranet. Every group gets a site. OneDrive browses all your files, modern extensibility, whether it's Power Apps or SharePoint framework. And then cloud first, but we support hybrid and servers.
And there's a lot there. I mean, I want to unpack a little bit of that stuff that you just mentioned. I mean, we earlier this week, we published, I guess this episode is going to come out the week following Ignite, but the week of Ignite, we published 2 episodes, one with Yina Arenas about some of the updates that have been in the Microsoft Graph and the ability now to be able to pull some of the data from on-prem in a hybrid deployment and being able to use that in the Graph and applications. That's tremendous, right? The other one, too, that we talked about that our listeners are going to hear about soon, we sat down with Mike Amerland about the SharePoint framework. And first time really our listeners are hearing about it. My co-host CJ and I, we've talked a little bit about it, but we really wanted to wait to get into depth of it when Ignite was coming around and Mike could sit down and talk to us. And I tell you, it's nice to see Microsoft and SharePoint specifically adopting the technologies that you see that are out there on the prevailing technologies as web developers. I can see that I know we've talked to people about this in the past, that there's going to be a challenge, I think, for some people to get ramped up on it because your traditional SharePoint developer, these are all new tools. But I know the web developers, they look at it the first time and they're like, oh yeah, this is great to see that you guys are adopting this stuff. So I know that when the first few drops came out, you saw a lot of questions and stuff, and it was kind of like, you can take SharePoint framework and set that aside because all you guys' questions are all about stuff that's the tooling and how they did it and stuff. So it doesn't really matter. Yeah. But you guys are getting great feedback too from a lot of the sessions about SharePoint framework this week from people that we've talked to on the floor and stuff. So that's awesome. Really great to see. Yeah. Another thing too I wanted to ask you about was, You talk a little about hybrid, and I know hybrid is a big piece of SharePoint. I mean, a lot of companies are on-prem; they may not be able to get to the cloud right away. It's a great way to kind of start moving in that direction. Where do you see hybrid going in the next few years, or something? Or what's if you had your crystal ball, how do you see companies adopting? Is it, for lack of a better term, is it the gateway drug to Office 365, or is it that we want to be able to take advantage of stuff? It's the Azure Stack version of SharePoint, right?
Yeah, we want to be flexible, but honest and transparent about the choices to go to the cloud with Office 365 in general and SharePoint in particular. And so it's a great question to spend a little bit of time on because it's so important. The first thing I'd say is no two companies are the same. I've talked to a lot of customers, dozens of customers this week. And so we also know the data from all our sort of customers in 365. And there's a very different profile. We have some like, the CIO of Accenture was here during the keynote. They've moved thousands and thousands of team sites and OneDrives and portals and so forth. And so we have some of the biggest companies in the world sort of going with all the SharePoint workloads, publishing sites, team sites, OneDrive. There are other companies that are going there in stages. We had a woman who's the general manager in IT for Delta, and they showed their DeltaNet portal that 260,000 people access, and that's running on SharePoint Online, but they haven't yet moved things like team sites and so forth. So sometimes people say, Jeff, give me a path. And I'd say, if you're only going to let me give you one, then it's going to be all into the cloud. Yeah. And they'd say, that's not realistic. And I'd say, well, we're going to give you the choice. You want OneDrive to go first? You can do that. You want to do what Delta did and go to the portal first? You can do that. And so we've introduced the server with hybrid search, hybrid profiles, hybrid OneDrive, hybrid team sites. Some people do all team sites. Some people do just extranet team sites first. We introduced this week taxonomy support and support for auditing, linking on premises in the cloud. We're trying to be incredibly flexible, but we also want to be honest and transparent. What people will get through hybrid, through server, through feature packs, even though we're committed, is a subset of what we offer in SharePoint Online, and it will be, in some cases, significantly later. Mm-hmm. So where it's feasible, the OneDrive and SharePoint mobile apps, we're going to make those connect to on-premises. It would be sort of rude not to. Where SharePoint Framework is going to come out in the cloud first, we're going to learn, get a bunch of feedback. At some point next year, we're going to say, it's ready to take a snapshot and put it on premises. We're going to do that. So we are going to bring new value on premises. But there's a whole ton of things around machine learning and the graph and so forth that we've got to run in the cloud because the elasticity of computing and the resources you need from algorithms. Satya talked here on Monday afternoon about the huge investment in artificial intelligence at the company. Some of those things will be available on premises. But I wouldn't say what we're doing in SharePoint Server is like the Azure Stack, where it's going to be pretty symmetrical. I would say it's going to be a compelling, high-quality upgrade with a subset of the functionality that will come after it's sort of proven in the cloud. Because we can't deliver on-prem every day like we do in the cloud. We got to take a snapshot. And so that means we have to wait a bit until people say, okay, your new document library experience in SharePoint, that's ready. You've addressed the feedback, and then we'll take a snapshot and bring it to on-prem. So anyway, we're excited about the options, the flexibility, but we really are clearly leading with the cloud because that's not only where you get the best value for your end users, it is where you get better security than on-premises. It really is. And so anyway, I'll wrap that on that one.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, it makes sense to focus on the cloud because, like you said, on the security, you have a lot more resources that can be focused on that instead of, in a sense, you're outsourcing those resources to each one of the organizations and their competency levels, which, I mean, there are varying degrees of that, varying degrees of businesses on what needs to have certain kinds of security and what things can be a little more lax in other organizations. But I guess the benefit, too, from the on-prem customers are they know that when they get it, it's not a brand new release, and then you're hoping for an update coming right away. It's more that this is battle-tested. This has been out for, 70 million users have been on this, and you get to take advantage of it.
Yeah, we really inverted the model. In 2013, if you all go all the way back, SharePoint Online's about 8 years old. We made a big mainstream offer out of it in Office 365 5 years ago in June of 2011. By 2013, we had switched from server first and then deployed to the cloud to right about simultaneously. The SharePoint 2013 server went into Office 365 about the same time, and we did learn. 2016, as you said, the model is inverted, that the code that's going into the server product has been run, we're running it on 50,000 servers and virtual machines and 30 data centers, from everything from server farms that have thousands of small businesses packed onto them to server farms in Office 365 that are supporting customers with hundreds of thousands of users. And we're exercising device compatibility, the application compatibility. So I really think it's led to the server product being much higher quality out the gate. That's why, as Bill Bear from our team, Bill really well, had a hugely attended session on SharePoint Server 2016. So we want to be clear that it's sort of a two-level thing. The server product's higher quality, we're committed, but it really, in our view, it is, for the vast majority of customers, a stepping stone to the cloud. And some customers are just bypassing that stepping stone, going right away. So we're trying to give people the choice.
You can tell, too, a lot of the stuff that the benefits or the changes that have happened in SharePoint 2016, you can see, at least from my observation from the outside of someone who's been working with the product for well over a decade, that Microsoft has learned a lot of things about hosting SharePoint, deploying SharePoint. I mean, there's the way of doing it for, in MSIT, in Microsoft's IT, where you have to maintain it for your organization of many, many employees. But when it's hosted as a hosted service, I mean, there's things like we see Minroll, and we see the way that the databases are managed. Zero downtime patching. It's like a lot of us on the outside, we've been saying we had these certain challenges. How are we going to address them? And when you guys get to experience the same kind of challenges firsthand too, and a lot of improvements are there, and now customers get to benefit from the advancements that you've made to make it easier to manage the product on the back end.
Yeah. One of the things every month, the Office 365 team send an email to Satya. Of course, he has access to all this stuff on Power BI every second. But, you sort of once a month, you summarize it in an email about the availability for the various Office 365 workloads. And so last night, the mail went to him on the performance for this month. And it was another 99.99% availability month for SharePoint Online. It doesn't mean we're not perfect, but it means as issues come up, we're able to detect instantly, remediate them, keep them from going to a broad set of customers. And the vast majority of our customers are not running their SharePoint deployment at 4.9. And it also means, the IT staff that used to set up and monitor these servers in SharePoint Server, they now get to engage with business users on business value. The whole point of technology is not so that IT people can set up server farms. As fun as that is, look, heck, I used to do that. In the early days of SharePoint, my office was right next to the cafeteria. The bill would come out about 11 o'clock. About noon, I'd hit install on SharePoint 2003, and then I'd go to lunch, and 20 minutes later, I'd come back to my office, I'd kick off a crawl, and then by about 1 o'clock, I had the day's build. And that was fun. But now it
doesn't add value, right?
Yeah. Now it wasn't a good use of my time. And so I think, as you said, having run massive scale cloud services for 8 years, we really can say we're not done with this journey, but we're best in class, and we really want to bring that value to our customers.
Absolutely. I want to take a little bit back and get some perspective from you on some stuff here that some of our listeners may be aware of the fact that you were with SharePoint for a long time, and then you took on a different role at Microsoft for a little while, and then came back in the last year or two to take over SharePoint. And I'm curious in asking you a couple questions about that. So when you were in that time that you were away from SharePoint and came back, when you came back to SharePoint, what did you bring with you that you kind of felt like, this is something that I was able to learn, or a perspective I was able to gain on it from stepping away from SharePoint for a little bit and doing other things for a little while, that you were able to apply this where you are right now?
That's a great question. I sort of hesitate to go deep on it because I feel that the answer is a little self-centered. I always try to do these in a way about what's in it for the customers, for the people who listen to these podcasts, as opposed to just being all about me. But it is that kind of question, so I'll sort of do it because I do think it helps the product. A lot of people get to do new things in their career, but maybe not go do something new for a while and come back. And I didn't anticipate that. It was sort of special. And, that sometimes happens in tech. Michael Dell's done that, Jobs did that, and so forth. And so I thought, we really got to leverage this. I did.
Good company to be in.
I wouldn't put myself in that company. But, I do sort of try to look at, what people who've done, sort of the people who've come back to something. Anyway, in doing the strategy role, there was a few things that, when you do strategic work, either inside our company or sort of assessing what's going on in the industry, you get a little bit more cold, logical, rational. I was and still am emotionally attached to SharePoint. Mm-hmm. And I try to be objective and try to listen to customers. And I think we do a good job. But, it's not like I saw it through sort of independent eyes. Mm-hmm. And when you're doing a strategy kind of role, you do have to say, look, what's going on in the industry. So one of the first things with the strategy team, we got to talk to Satya when I took on that role. He said, what do you think we should do? I said, gosh, we got to get dramatically more relevant on mobile apps. And we helped the Exchange team out of my team go buy Acompli and rebranded Outlook. It was a case of, look, people access their email being coldly logical. People spend most of their time accessing email in their mail on their phone. A lot of them are accessing it on our servers and services in Exchange. But they're not, they're using Apple or Google's experience for that. And so we innovate in Exchange. It's never going to show up to the user because they're seeing the Apple and Google mail apps. Not that those are bad apps. It just meant we could no longer innovate in the email experience because somebody else had the UI. And so you get logical and say, wow, we got to fix that problem and fix it fast. Let's go buy this great company called Acompli. And Javier Soltero, who leads that company, now runs the Outlook experience across all the platforms. So that was, one thing is just getting very logical on things. The other is simplicity. That is, you get out, and I spend time in the Valley in San Francisco and talking to customers, and things that are just complicated, barely sold, were understandable 10 years ago. Now it's almost excessive, this premium on simplicity. Mm-hmm. And then the third thing, that being sort of a web app dev guy with SharePoint and having built SharePoint on .NET, I actually spent more time coding, and it wasn't part of the job description, the strategy role. It's just in the evening, I was so deprived from actually playing with products in a deep way during the day because I was doing the strategy stuff that I had this addiction that I had to go back. And so the evening I would write code, and I had a chance to look at Node.js and Angular and React. There's a smaller project called Meteor. There's a whole bunch of open source things and cloud services that I got to play with. And so by the time Satya sent me that email and said, you got to go back to SharePoint, I had in my head, okay, let's look at the business objectively. Mobile's going to be super important. Let's leverage what's going on in the development community broadly. And sort of most importantly, let's go back to our core and make it really simple. SharePoint's your intranet. Team collaboration sites in SharePoint going to be the lowest friction way to collaborate. OneDrive browses all your files. We love people extending it. That's sort of 4 or 5 pillar thing. Mm-hmm. And so I think I would not have been able to attack that with the same perspective having stayed inside the team the whole time. And so that's a good reminder, I think, not only for me, if I try to generalize this for all of us, like think about your job and step back for a second and say, if I was approaching this job as an outsider, whatever it is, new to the company, new to the people, I was loyal to my team, but perhaps not overly loyal. I was listening to customers, but perhaps not listening too much because too many customers would stay on-prem and do, cloud work. It was really a fantastic experience for me to step back and come in with a little bit more objectivity. But then I hope we've shown this week still the same insane level of SharePoint passion that we've always had. And so it's been sort of the best of both worlds. And I hope that wasn't a too self-indulgent an answer.
No, I don't think it was. It provides insight to it. It helps people understand kind of where we are, where we're going and stuff. So this is very useful, very helpful. I've got another question that's a bit different, but one of the observations that a lot of people have had, I mean, I've noticed this too, is that it seems like over the last year or two, we've seen a big push on like a diversity seeing not just from Microsoft as a whole, but also coming out of Office.
Yeah.
And we've seen like at Build this previous year, Arenas just would basically own the demos for Office and SharePoint and Microsoft Graph and everything. 22, 23 minutes, I think, of just solid demos in the keynotes of her just owning it, which blew us away. I mean, being able to have that much of a demo in a keynote, that was pretty impressive. Seeing things like this week at the Ignite keynotes, you see that Julia White's pretty much running as the host of it, and then seeing like all the female presenters up there as well. I'm curious to hear, is there anything that's going on with Office, with SharePoint, that has a focus on that, or as trying to pay attention to what can we do as an industry, as a community, to really push that diversity thing a little bit more as well?
I think that's great. That's such an important topic, for a variety of reasons, that there's a lot of groups of individuals that aren't fully participating in all the opportunities that exist in the world. Women is clearly one group, but there are very underrepresented minority groups and subsections of our population that aren't participating in the economy broadly with the same level of equality, and particularly in technology. Our industry, and I see it, and I noticed that, frankly, I was at a party the other night that one of our customers threw. It's just very striking that women is an easy one to talk about because they're half the population. Half the population is not represented proportionally in our industry, and they should be. I have two daughters. This hits home for me. A few years ago, I was the diversity executive sponsor for the entire Office division. I got to go to the Grace Hopper's, the Anita Borg Foundation's Grace Hopper conference, I think with about 150 women from Microsoft, and it was just an eye-opener for me. And so I think we have more to do, and I think it comes everything from making technology more accessible in schools at the youngest age, making sure girls in particular don't think technology is a boy thing. That is the root of a lot of this. But also when women enter into a largely male-dominated technology company or industry, sort of going the extra mile to find sort of role models and showcases like Julia's fantastic. There's no men versus women thing on Julia. Julia is the best person to do what she did, and the fact that she's a role model for women, and it is great. By the way, I sent her an email over the weekend and said, I'll pay you $20 if you mention SharePoint in the keynote kickoff. And she said, I love SharePoint, I'll do it anyway. So I saw her the other day, and I tried to give her the 20 and she didn't take it. But anyway, Julia's fantastic. It's just another example of a woman that we highlighted in my session this week and has done her own session. Our relatively new group program manager for the SharePoint backend infrastructure and the IT experience, Navjot Virk. She's incredible. There's no let's pick the best person for the job. That's a woman. It was pick the best person in the job. And she's a woman. Great. Let's showcase that to the industry. And so it's my job at all levels of our organization. Arenas is a good example. How can we cultivate more of that in Microsoft and show these strong, powerful, confident women? Another example that was sort of an eye-opener for me, when I was doing the strategy role, I worked directly for Amy Hood, who's our CFO, who is an incredibly smart, powerful woman in technology. In fact, Forbes or Fortune came out with the most powerful women in the world, and she was ranked above Taylor Swift. And I came home to my wife and daughters and said, I work for one of the most powerful women in the world who's more powerful than Taylor Swift. And they were pretty impressed by that. So I
speaking their language.
But having worked for Amy, I will tell you, there was not, Satya didn't pick her to give an opportunity to a woman. He picked her because she's just amazing, incredibly smart, very demanding, and a lot of the progress that the company's made over the last couple of years with Satya is because of Amy. So at all levels of Microsoft, whether it's Amy Hood, our CFO, whether it's Julia or Navjot and our team, we need to get awesome role models out there to get more women into technology companies, to get more girls to love technology. One of the things we had this week, and I I have nothing to do with it, and I'm sort of hesitant because I don't want it to look like marketing. But I'm thrilled just watching it. Is this women in SharePoint group that I don't know how many people attended this week, but last time I saw one of their events, it was huge. There was hundreds of people. So this is just a great topic, and I could go on and on about it.
It's funny. It's funny you say that, because I know one of the people that's really big into that gum, Kathy Dew, is
Cat Paint One or whatever her Twitter handle is.
Yeah. CJ and I are actually helping her stand up a podcast around women in technology, women in SharePoint. With she's co-hosting with a bunch of people, but it's like, you don't focus on the production side of it. You focus on the content and help getting the word out. This needs to be talked about more. So here's our way to do that. They have the I Stand By You campaign, or I Stand With You campaign. And that was our way of doing the contribution. So, Well, Jeff, I really appreciate you taking the time, sitting down and talking to us. Is there anything that you want, like a call to action you want to leave our listeners with, of what should they do today to, how do they get started? What should they do?
Yeah, I just say take a fresh look at SharePoint. Like any other product that's been around a long time, people have an impression of it. Some of it's great. Some of it's like, hey, that UI that you shipped in 2007 is looking a little long in the tooth or something like that. So just take a fresh look at what we've done. Use it and give us feedback. We are a very, very customer-driven team. I think people will see since the May 4th event, we've gotten a lot of positive feedback, but people have said, hey, you kind of missed it on this feature or that feature. And we've listened, and, within, a matter of weeks, we've sort of adapted. So we're very fortunate to have the SharePoint community out there. Give it a look, give it a try, keep pushing us, and we'll see you at a SharePoint Saturday.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Jeff, and I hope everybody enjoyed that interview.
Thanks.
Did you like this episode? Please tweet about it and drop us a 5-star review on iTunes. Word of mouth recommendations are the most effective ways for us to grow the show, and we'd really appreciate it. If you have a question for us, go to microsoftcloudshow.com/questions, where you can submit it as text or record it as a WAV or MP3 and provide us a link so we can play your question on the show. Our theme music is an excerpt from Evaporated Eric by Monk Turner, used under Creative Commons. You can subscribe to us on iTunes and the Google Play Store by searching for Microsoft Cloud Show, or via RSS at microsoftcloudshow.com, where you'll also find show notes for each episode. You can also find us on Facebook searching for Microsoft Cloud Show, or on Twitter at MS Cloud Show. And finally, sign up to our mailing list by heading to our website and entering your email to interact with us. Participate in upcoming interviews and other cool stuff. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.